Hello, here we are once again with Mookie Tenembaum. We are exploring, as many of you already know, his philosophy, his disillusionism through these videos. And we are trying to understand and to illustrate his misalgic theory about human behavior as a way of averting suffering. We are already in late January 2022, still amidst the COVID-19 pandemic, as we've been since the beginning of this ongoing exercise. And today we are going to try and analyze the concept of shame. Shame is a special suffering in the galaxy of misalgic constraints to human behavior. So we are going to try and take a look at it and, of course, try and illustrate it with current affairs, with news from the pandemic, as we usually do. But let's take a look at shame from a disillusionist, from a misalgic point of view, and see what happens.
Well, yes, shame. Well, shame, and more importantly, the fear of shame. Yes, fearing shame, trying to avoid shame. It's what the real suffering we're talking about. Yes, I'm afraid of if I will be caught with one of my fly open, my pants. Yes, that's the kind of shame. But I want to differentiate. Yes, I mean that's one possibility. Having your sons and daughters being thieves, it's another source of shame, but it's not the same one we're talking about. But both of them are shame, and we fear and we dread both of them. We don't want to feel shame, and it's a specific suffering. It is something very unusual. It's one of those sufferings that makes it we have a reason to have a special video about it, like we had about boredom. Yes, they are very unusual. They're unusual because they are really happening, most of them, inside our head. It's not that there is a part of the outside that deals with this. So the first thing that I would like to do is to differentiate shame from guilt. And this is very important because when you feel guilt, it is something that happens between you and yourself. There is the voice inside of you, or the feeling of oppressed that you feel of you, but it is happening to you. You are the judge, you are the accused, and you are the defendant, and you are the accused, and you are everything. In shame, you really what happens is there is two possibilities. One, it still happens inside of your head only, but the attribution is to somebody else. That means you cannot feel shame by yourself. You cannot feel shame of yourself. Of course, you should be ashamed, and people say, I am ashamed, and they are contrite. You know, we have a lot of words for this thing, but what we are talking is not shame, is guilt. They are not meaning shame. Shame is before a third party. And the interesting about it is that it is you have to to understand that most of the shame, or most of our fear of shame, is exaggerated. If I am with my fly open and I'm giving a conference, and after the conference I realize that my fly was open. Now the things that will go through my head, in my case, maybe less. In the most people, they will get, you know, if you cannot turn it around and make it funny to yourself, it's a disaster. It's a tragedy. You were preparing for that conference for weeks, and it was like in front of all the big wigs and everybody, and there you are standing, looking what you think like an idiot. You are becoming you having ridicule. People are laughing at you. That's how you live. Most probably, some people saw it, and the ones that saw it smiled. That's it. But you will, and the problem with that is that you cannot go and verify. If you think that you did something wrong to somebody, yes, you offended them. You can go, did I offend you? I didn't mean it. What are you going to do? Hey, I want to have another conference to tell them about my open flight. What do you think about all this, Florencio?
I'm interested in the difference you make between shame and guilt. I think both of them serve a purpose in sort of regulating social behavior, but I understand how they are different in the terms you used, in terms of shame needing others to function, even imaginary others. But before that, I wanted to ask you, after the examples you gave, because there's a difference, I think, between sons and daughters being thieves and the open fly. In terms of sons and daughters being thieves, being something that might have dire consequences for us as social beings. I can see the cost involved in that. No one would be my partner. I would be shunned. I would be even despised by members of the community. The open fly has no real cost involved, and still we feel ashamed. So I wanted to ask you about this second difference, not only between shame and guilt, but within shame, between those embarrassments that might have a social cost for us and those embarrassments that, as you said, are entirely within our heads. And I think there's an interesting difference to be made there also.
Of course, this is, again, like any other sufferings, there are one sufferings that imply long term. Yes, you lost a finger, okay, or you had a heart attack, or on a physical part, or you offended deeply your boss. Yes, you were overheard speaking. That could be shame too. There's a part of shame also there. Of course, it's not the same than if you are caught in a situation in which other people can empathize with you and say, well, it was nothing, and so forth. But that doesn't mean that you are going to live it that way. The fact that this is going to have an implication long term, may be two sufferings. One is shame, and the other one is the suffering of not getting a raise for the next 5 years. Yes, or having to pay somebody for a damage you have bestowed on somebody. You have damaged somebody. You have. I miss the term, but yes, you do damage to somebody. You have to pay. So there is two parts in it. Yes, you may feel shame but the question is, on the other side, what do you think what happens in the other side? Now, this is very important. We said many times, one of the big limitations is I don't know what it feels to be Florencio, and Florencio doesn't know what it feels to be Mookie. And that applies not only to both of us, but to the rest of the universe also, the rest of the people. Just to make it clear. Yes. So if I can't know what it feels to be you, I have to imagine it. And then I said how I would feel about it. And how I would feel, I will use the most stringent, the most hard interpretation possible. If that would happen, I would be laughing about his open flight for the next 3 weeks. And I will tell it to everybody, I was in a conference, I can't believe it. So this happens in your head. And that is the problem. Shame is a suffering that it is not necessarily dependent from the real fact. Having said that, yes, there are certain shames that have that may linger for a long time. Yes, the fact that you have children that are thieves, yes, or that you did something that doesn't have to be morally. That doesn't have to be a moral breaking a moral rule. It doesn't have to be or an ethical rule. Not at all. It has to do with sometimes with your pride. Listen, people who have pride, the bigger your pride, the more vulnerable to shame you are. We have stories of in history. Yes, people announcing the president of Egypt in 1967 announcing that they're going to throw the Jews of the sea, that they will finish and they will go walk into Tel Aviv with their tanks. And in 6 days, they were all wiped out. Nothing was left from his army. He was in a situation of shame. In Japan, that would probably go directly into a seppuku, into a ritual suicide. But here is very important, since I'm mentioning that. Shame is a cultural thing too. The amount of shame and when do you feel shame it's related to your culture. So you have in Japan, the shame also is being used, or it is a way of social constraint and cohesion instead of guilt. Guilt is much smaller. Not that people have less guilt. It's less used in a way to control society. Shame is a way to control society. In our society, which is much more liberal, in which you have more, then it's different. But again, it doesn't matter. The moment you feel shame, you feel ashamed. If you are, even if you've never heard about Japan and you don't like sushi, it doesn't matter. You feel shame. Every sentiment is right.
Since you brought it, I was meaning to ask you about the other side. Of course, we've been talking about feeling embarrassed and shame and ashamed, but there is shaming going on. There is an act of shaming on the other side that is being used, as you said, according to each culture and to each situation, but it's being used as a sort of punishment, or at least as a sort of threat. And it does work as a deterrent in many cases. So I was going to ask you about shaming as a political, even a social tool, and maybe we can get into the role it's played during this pandemic.
Well, we will talk about the pandemic, but let me remind you of something we all know. One of the things that we are now trying to fight, socially speaking, is bullying. And bullying is 95% shaming. And it works. And there are people you cannot bully because they don't feel shame. I'm not saying there is an equivalent to a psychopath on guilt, that but it is very hard to use shame on some people because they don't feel it. Of course, that shame, and in that shame, it comes also with the threat of social isolation. Yes, because those people doing bullying, they are separating, they're leaving you alone, you are being isolated, and that is the threat. The threat is not only shame, is now isolation. Exactly what you said before. There is two ways. Now, if we go up in the and get into the players, into the illusions, the countries, even the religions use shame many times. Shame in front of God. Yes, you can feel shame in front of your dog. If you are kissing and hugging with your partner, and the dog is looking, some people say, no, I don't want that. The dog is looking at his life. The computer is looking at you. Well, unless it's Zoom, then it's another story. But that's it. And here we get into the pandemic. During the pandemic, shame is being used. Why you are not wearing a mask? Why you're not vaccinating? And it's an effective tool. Many people wear a mask not because they think they want to wear a mask, but because they can sleepwalk through it wearing a mask. What does it mean? It means shame is not part of the equation. They are already using a mask. So to sleepwalk, you need not to suffer. If shaming is a possibility, then you will do anything to avoid shaming. That's the hard part. Then you have the good part of it. The good part of it is that we have having conversation in Zoom, and I could be now with my underwear. Nobody looks. I mean, it's my shirt here. Yes, my conference shirt, my video shirt, the one I use for every video. So, but of course, I could be with my underwear. I'm not. I'm wearing pants.
Good to know.
But the important thing is that kind of leeway that you have, you don't have to. If you don't have to go to work because you have to go to work from your home, your car doesn't have to be clean. Your clothes doesn't have to be being changed every day or every. Yes,
I was thinking deodorants and perfumes are redundant.
Again,
what about
and some
odor?
of them, people don't have a problem with their own smell. It's for the others. So they put a smell. If you have a perspiration odor, the other person, and then you feel shame. Yes, it's all as you chose a very good example. So all this has been like the territory pride adds the vulnerability to shame. It's bigger. The more pride you have, the less you are in contact with people, and it's okay to be not in contact with them. Then
there's no
the less
shame.
you have. Yes, there is no shame in not going to work because you are supposed. I'm saving you. I'm being nice to you. I am thinking about you. So the whole thing changes. What will happen, Florencio, after this pandemic one day will be finished and we will go back to work? If we do, I don't know. Will we? There are people that will think, part of their the mysalgic calculation, what we say the calculus, yes, you think what hurts more. We think, well, is it worth for me to go to the office and this and that and being and have to all that now that I know that I don't need it? An interesting point. We'll see.
We will. We are out of time already.
There is one thing more before we leave, because I think it's important. Is when you feel the shame, you feel shame for somebody else. I don't know. In Spanish there is a word for that. I don't know how do you say it in English, but you say somebody says an idiotic thing, and it's not he said it, not you, but you feel empathically the shame. I think the one of the many examples, players, ministers, and all kinds of people said during this pandemic the terrible idiotic things they said. But one of them, many of them saying the pandemic is over. That could be several times. But the Minister of Health in Argentina, I just heard, she said that the Omicron is there is a relation between Omicron and your blood blood type, AB or C or AB plus. I mean, I felt the shame for her, but that's empathy, and it's really she doesn't feel shame. She doesn't feel shame. Because for that you have to know that what you did is really it creates
she might even be proud of herself, and still you feel ashamed for her.
That is correct. That's just one more part of the shame. Of course, we could be talking about this for a long time, but we have the limitation of our video.
Thank you very much. See you next time.
See you next time.
If you enjoyed the video, please like it, comment and subscribe.